Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll continue inside because he's going to actually develop the whole mashal of mashpia and makabel, and now we're up to the point where he's going to explain the nimshal as it relates to the name Havaya and the name Elikim, and he'll go back to each point in the mashal to some degree. So instead of just reviewing the whole thing, well, he's going to review it piece by piece by reconnecting back to the point. But generally speaking, the idea was that he showed step by step how the name Elikim is not really, or within the creative process, the power of concealment in the creative process is really only for the purpose of reviewing, even though it has to do it in a limited, targeted way, but that's only as part of the process, it's part of a gradual process, but ultimately, not only is it not a concealment relative to the mashpia, to the creator, it's not a concealment relative to the makabel either, because ultimately, the idea is that he should get the entire message, the entire revelation. It's just that, as he explained, it's a process, which in Mashpia and Makabel, the process is described as taking 40 years. After 40 years, a person is Aymer al-Das Rabbi. I do have to mention that I mentioned last week when we learned about this, after 40 years, a person is Aymer al-Das Rabbi. And I mentioned that there was a lot to be said on it in the context of the fact that the Rebbe, after 40 years of leadership, the Rebbe spoke repeatedly about how now things are different because we have the 40 years, so we already have this Adam Aymer al-Das Rabbi. There's a lot to say about that, and it's been cooking since last week. I mean, it's something that's always there, but it was because I brought it up and I was learning about it, thinking about it. So it's been cooking by me for a while now. But I'm not going to let it all out on you because we'll stay on the topic. But it's definitely, I'm going to have to find some way to relieve the pressure, but that's not your problem. Okay, so V'adugim Mikolze Yuvin L'mayla, near the bottom of page Nun. V'adugim Mikolze Yuvin L'mayla, Inyan Shem Havaya V'elikim. So this is a model from all of this to be understood how it is up above in the matter of the name Havaya and the name Elikim. The Shem Elikim of Chenes Midas HaTzimtzum B'Ahester, that the name Elikim is the aspect, the attribute of constriction and concealment, Shemetzamtzim Umastir Al Er Shem Havaya, that constricts and conceals on the light of Shem Havaya, B'chdei Sheyuchal Liyos Hishavos Ha'ilus, in order to allow for the possibility that there be the creation of the worlds. Hine Nizbar Le'er, this was explained earlier, Shem Havaya Hu Makar Hagila, that the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that's the source of the revelation. Hainu Gili Er V'Chenes Bli Gvul, the revelation of light, but in the way of without limit, of infinity. Being that the ha'er davuk b'mar, who me'ein amar, being that the light is attached to the light source, as we know in the Gashmis, the Gemashal of the sun, if you put anything between the sun and the light disappears. Right? So if you put up a curtain, benefit of a blind, the light doesn't continue because it's not connected to the source. The light is, but here, being that light by definition is what it is that it's connected to its source, maamar, and it's also a microcosmic expression from the light source. So it is a me'ain of the source. It's not a separate product. It's not something that's an unrelated product that's a byproduct of the source. It emanates and originates from the source, so it's similar to its source. Kshem shamar hu ein soif, just like the light source is ein soif, is without limit. K'maikin er gamkin ein soif hu. Similarly, the light is also ein soif. So that's the revelation from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, the is, which is ein soif. Imkein harei einai be'erech ha'olamus. If that being the case, it's not be'erech ha'olamus. Shekol ha'olamus and l'chinas yeshud vul chulei kana. Because all of the worlds are an aspect of yesh, of an existence, vul, and a limited existence at that. As we explained earlier, that even in Atzilus, there is an aspect of Vul, ain't safe, who built about Vul. But the infinite light is without any limit, it is infinite. Vul, who built about Vul, ain't no be'erach zelazech. Vul and built about Vul are not be'erach one to the other. There's no point of commonality between them. There's no way one can relate to the other. They exist on entirely different planes of existence. So, even though we're saying that they have no commonality and no relativity one to the other, we're not saying, so creation is from Shem Elikeh. No. Creation is from the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. You can only have the creation of the worlds via the revelation of the Ein Seif. Why is that? As it is known that every action is something which is acting upon something outside of oneself, or outside of the thing which is doing the pula. It is specifically through the revelation of the power of Koach HaPoel. So, just gave us a rule, a well-known rule. So it may sound a little mystifying, but it's actually a very simple fact of life. When a person throws a ball, that's not mysticism, that's not Kabbalah. People throw balls. So when a person throws a ball, so yes, he has a power to aim the ball. Right? The shortstop has to throw the ball to first base. So he wants to make sure it doesn't go too high. He wants to make sure it doesn't go too low. He doesn't want to go too far to the right, to the left, right? He wants to get as close to the first baseman's glove, so he has to reach out as little as possible. So he's trying to aim it, right? Now, he also wants it to be a certain speed, He doesn't want to overthrow it. He doesn't want to underthrow it. He has it the right speeds, right? So it's all about limit and focus and target. But that power to aim, limit, focus, target won't get the ball to the guy. What gets the ball to the guy is the power to throw. It's the power to throw is what does the throwing. Sure, you have within the power to throw, you have the ability to manage it and to guide it, but that's not what's going to get it thrown. So that's not going to get the ball to first base. What's going to get the ball to first base is the power to throw. So you can't get the thing done. All of the all of the other aspects of the creative process, which sort of tailor the outcome, which guide the outcome, but the actual pa'ula is not going to happen without the Koach HaPoel. The Koach HaPoel has to be revealed. It has to be expressed. You have to use that Koach has to be manifest. Okay, it has to be open and revealed that there's a Koach HaZrika. You can cover up the fact that Koach HaZrika could throw 5 times further, or it could throw 10 times higher, or it could throw that you may not see. All the different things that it could do, but you're going to see that it's at work. The Koach HaZrika is at work, as limited and as targeted as you make it. You cannot get the job done without the Koach HaPoel being revealed in the pool. And the same thing applies in more abstract things like producing an idea, like using your mind. I mean, you can, as much as you have to have all these abilities to tailor the idea, and to focus the idea, to target it, and to guide it and limit it, but it's not coming out unless there's the Koach HaPoel of producing the idea, and then it will come out on the subject and in the form and that you want it to, but it has to. So similarly, the Shem Elokim, it adds all these wonderful ingredients to the creative process in terms of tailoring it, but the creative process itself can only happen with the Koach HaPoel, which is the Ein Sof. But I give it Ein Sof is bleak volcana, the Ein Be'erach HaElemus. But we have the problem is that the revelation of the Ein Sof is infinite, as we mentioned before, and it's not Be'erach HaElemus. It doesn't. In other words, a guy, if the third baseman has an infinite power of throwing, the first baseman, his glove is not going to help him. He's got to get out of the way because there's nothing. I mean, that's nothing stopping that. So obviously, it's not. It's but here, and there's nothing you can do about it. So here we have an infinite revelation, infinite power of. So that's what it means. If Eretz Seif is, because that's what it is. It's Davik Ba'amar and it's Mein Amar. So it has to. It is what it is. It is infinite. So he needs that one. Shem Elikim, Shem Matzam, Shem Amaylo, Master. So the Shem Avaya. That's the Indian. The Shem Elikim. The same God that has the power in infinity also has the power in finite. So he himself can, through the manifesting that power, which we call the Shem Elikim, that will constrict and cover up and hide as the Shem Havaya, the light of the Shem Havaya. So what is actually being hidden here? You just said you have to have a scholar's Koach HaPoel. You have to see that there's a creative force at work here. So you can, and the creative force is infinite. What is hidden from sight, from being revealed, is the innermost essence of the light of the Shem Havaya. And the only thing that shines forth is an external glimmer from that light. This glimmer is misblabeshes became the spheres that that is what is invested in the vessels. It dresses itself up, so to speak, in the vessels of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Now it could already be divided into different types of expressions, whether it's the form of Chachma or in the form of Chesed. Now it has some relativity and connectivity to worlds because it has already taken on a more limited form of expression, even though it's still the infinite light, but it's only what's being expressed and revealed is only a more limited form. So it's not revealed yet. We're still in Eilam Atzilus. We're still within the realm of Creator. We haven't yet left the realm of Creator into the created world. Eilam Atzilus is, even though it's called the world, it's still in the realm of the Creator. It's one with the Creator. It's not. It's sort of, for an easy, lazy term, it's sort of the adopted personality of the Creator. That's how he's going to interact and relate to the world. But that's still all him. So that is like the idea that we said in the mashal, that before the mashpia gives over this deep abstract idea to the makabel that's completely beyond his capacities to receive, he has to within himself, the creative process of communicating deep and abstract ideas requires that within himself he first break it down and contain it in a more limited form, and now with that he'll be able to find the point of common ground within himself that he has with the recipient, and that this idea can be communicated to the recipient. That process has to first take place within himself. So that's Lamaila, the idea of the world of Atzilus. So he says, that's like the constricted seichel of the mashpia that is already on a level of being relative to the makabel. Afterwards, through chitzeni sakel. And through the parsa that separates between Atzilus and the lower worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, which are already created realities, even though they're still all in the spiritual realms before you get to Asiya Agashmas. He says, so we did mention earlier about the parsa and mentioned that it would come up again a little bit later, that he says that over there in Torah, that Rebbe explains that the parsa is like the Inyan of Mishalom, which we said that's also part of the creative process within the mashpia, is that still inside his own mind he's dressing it up in an analogy. He's coming up with a mashal. He's coming up with an analogy, but that mashal already is now the step between his understanding and how it's going to get to the makabel, but through this process of chitzeni sakel, which again, chitzeni sakel on the most simple level is, as we spoke about way back, is that the Kabbalah talks about the pnimi sakeli, the emtzai sakeli, and the chitzeni sakeli. So the pnimi sakeli is what receives the contents. That's where the contents meets the keli on the inside. That's where they meet. The emtzai sakeli is what gives the keli the substance to sort of contain it, to hold it. The chitzeni sakeli is what makes it accessible to the person using it. You have to be able to grab the cup by the outside. That's what's going to make it accessible. So, whatever that means in Lamaila and Eilam Atzilus, there's an aspect called chitzeni sakelim. Chitzeni sakelim is within the kelim Atzilus already the beginning of relating to the outside, and then there's the parsa, which he says is like the idea of the mashpia dressing it up in a mashal. So through that, the chitzeni sakelim and the parsa. So now from within the mashpia, now is nimshach lefi erech ha'elam is bali gvul lahavas elam is biyah. So now something's being communicated outside of the mashpia to the kabel, which in the nimshal, which we're talking about the creative process l'mayla, it means that now a light that's lefi erech ha'elam is bali gvul, that's relative to and tailored to, targeted to, measured to worlds that are limited, that are finite. Lahavas Elam is biyah, in order to bring into existence those worlds of Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. Ach, Hine, Kol B'chinas Helam V'Hestan Al D'Shem Elokim. However, all of this aspect of concealment and hiding, covering up and concealment of the name Elokim, there's no real concealment going on. It's not like objectively there's a concealment going on, because relative to the Ein Sof, no concealment happened. Just like we said, relative to the Mashpia, who's constricting the idea and bringing it down. No, nothing happened. It's not concealing for him. It's only so Lamaila. This whole process that we're describing as concealment of the light, in order to create, that's relative to him. There's no concealment happening. It's not a. It's only relative to the recipient. Who can Moshe, as we said before in the Mashal, Shalagabe Mashpia ain't Shum Hela. Relative to Mashpia, there is no concealment. The Meir Etzloi, and by him, it's still shining full force. Kol Eimek Sichloi B'Chachmasai, the entire depth of his intellect and his wisdom. Gam Ba'aseichel HaMetzumtzum Uba'HaMsholim Chulei Kanal. Also in the Seichel as it is in its more limited form, ready to be communicated to the Mashpia, or even as even as it's actually being communicated, and in the analogies and examples and so on, all of that, by him, there's no concealment happening. He sees it with the full luminescence of brightness, and by him life does no less than before. Similarly, will be understood up above. That relative to the Ein Sof, there is no tzimtzum and hester at all. The Ein Sof that the Ein Sof is found in the so-called empty space, within which created reality exists. So that's a reference to the Tzimtzum HaRishon, which, so to speak, generated this empty space called Makom Achol Achar HaTzimtzum. So Ein Sof is revealed there after the Tzimtzum K'may Kedem HaTzimtzum. It is revealed there after the Tzimtzum. It is just like it was before the Tzimtzum. As it says, the heavens and the earth I fill. Can a person hide himself in a hiding place, and I will not see him? After all the cover-ups and concealments, the light of the Ein Sof, blessed be He, is present in every single place. There is no space that is empty of Him at all. There is no such thing. Interestingly, for this, he brings a pasuk, which is actually the first psukim he brought was from the perspective of the Mashpia, right? As Hashemayim V'Sa'aretz Ani Malei, that's Hashem talking. Yisas Ish V'Mistarim V'Ani Lo Yarem, that's Hashem talking. Here, interestingly, he brings a pasuk from the perspective of David HaMelech is the one who's talking, and he says, "Im Esak Shemayim Shamata, if I will fly up to heaven, you are there. V'Atzir She'erli Nekar, and if I settle down into the pits of hell, there you are." So it's like the Gam B'Sheil, that even in She'el V'Eretz Sivit Salmavis, which these are all terminology for places that are the concealment of the godly light are the most extreme. They're called places of desolation and complete lack of life. So even in those places, B'chinas Tachlis HaHelam VaHester, the ultimate cover-up and concealment, Gam Sham Nimtze Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Even in those places, that's what David HaMelech is communicating, that even in those places, the Ein Sof is present. The entire concealment is only relative to the created beings, that they don't see the revelation of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. So David HaMelech did not say that I see you there. He just said that there you are. He said that your presence is there. So we still didn't get the idea that, so in that sense, we're still talking from the perspective of objective reality, from the perspective of objective reality, not just from the perspective of the mashpia, but even from the perspective of objective reality. That is where the Ein Sof is present in all places, and the concealment is only relative to the created beings that do not see the revelation of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Aval Gabi Ein Sof Baruch Hu Ein Shum Helam V'Hester Klal Hu. But from the perspective of the Ein Sof, there is actually no cover-up and concealment at all. It's V'hine. So that's the part of the mashal as we gradually went through the mashal, the mashpia and the mekabel. So the first step he made was that there's no concealment for the mashpia, even when he's doing this process of bringing it down, of limiting it and packaging it. There's no concealment for the mashpia at all. But now he wants to go on to the next step of the mashal, that ultimately there is no real concealment relative to the mekabel either. In truth, it's not a real concealment relative to the created beings as well. So here he says in a parenthetical comment, and actually one is dependent on the other. If there was a real concealment relative to the mashpia, there would be a hester relative to the mekabel also, because the mashpia can't communicate what is not revealed by him. So if it's not revealed by him, he can't communicate it. It's not going to be revealed to the mekabel either. And the other way also, because it is not concealed from the perspective of the mashpia, it's not a concealment relative to the mekabel either. So what is the difference? The difference is whether it's in the form of a direct light, as it is by the mashpia, he's starting with the light and bringing it down, or it's an chayzer where you have to sort of take the little bit of light and work your way back to get from the mashal to work your way back to the nimshal, from the nimshal to work your way back to a deeper and deeper understanding. But the light is there. It just, in order for it to come out, it has to sort of bounce off. It has to. In fact, interestingly enough, in the actual physical sun, they've taken pictures of the sun, and all around the sun it's dark. It sounds weird, but the darkness of space is all around the sun as well. The problem is you can't. You have to get these whatever scopes they have. They have to get the picture on an angle, because otherwise the light of the sun is going to. But if you get it on the angle, you literally see sun, the body of the sun, and black space. So the light that comes to us is it's sort of like passes through the darkness before it comes out as as the light that we can receive, but like relative to the sun, within the sun, and nobody's taking pictures of inside the sun and finding black. It's just you literally see the body of the sun. It just looks like a fireball, and then blackness, because when it's inside the sun, the intensity there is beyond anything. You can't even take a direct picture of it either. It's all sort of to get the right angle with it. It's kind of like the edge of the sun and the dark space around it. So relative to if the concealment, so that's sort of the difference between Aryasha and Archaizer is that Aryasha makes its way down here, and Dafka, because it bounces back off of the Earth's atmosphere, that's why we actually get light from that. It's really the bounce back effect. The light of the sun is not seen throughout space. You don't see light traveling throughout space. You just see darkness. It's when the light bounces, the rays bounce off the Earth, its atmosphere. That's when you actually see the light, the Earth.
Why is it mochrach that if it's master the gabi the makabel, or being that by the mashpia it's begilud, for sure it's going to be begilud by the makabel.
He didn't.
It says machashene has to the gabi mashpia, because the gabi the mashpia it's not a real concealment. Ain't the has to the gabi makabel gamke. Why is it so mochrach? Say that for him it's begilud, for the makabel.
He's saying if in other words if the tailoring and limiting process was one which is limiting Lagabi to Mashpia. Just to give you an example, like we said, the example we used before that of a pa'ula where you're like throwing a ball, right? Throwing a ball. We said you have to limit the speed, the velocity, the direction, right? But it's limited for you too. It's not just limited for the guy catching the ball. It's limited for you too. Because it's limited for you too. It's limited for him. There's nothing more to him to see in this thing except that you could throw a ball and reach the first baseman. It tells him nothing about all the other endless possibilities of what you could do with your power to throw, and that it doesn't come out. All that comes out is this very limited expression of this power, because the limit is real. You need the limit to be real. But in the mashpia and the makabel, in the communication of ideas, when you're putting your all into the idea, so you are putting your all into the idea. If you're putting your all into the idea, then ultimately the makabel should be able to work his way back to receive it, because you put it all in there.
Even though he's believable, you're a ghoul, but if he put himself in there, you should be able to track your way back.
That's actually a very good question on this comparison between Mashpia and Makabel. And this,
you're saying
because it's okay. The fact, it's says that itself, you're still going to have to come on to Kol Yachol. You're still going to have to come on to Kol Yachol, because the originally putting Bligvul into Gvul is only because Kol Yachol, only because he can do whatever he wants. Because all of the examples we're going to give are not really Bligvul, they're only relative.
Because that's the Kolon.
Less limited and more limited. But so you're still going to have to come on to Kol Yachol. But once the Kol Yachol set up this system of packaging and delivering packages, and he puts himself completely into the package, then he's saying, I'm playing by these rules. He doesn't have to play by these rules. He makes the rules. But he's letting you know that these are the rules I play by. If you can catch the ball, then you can work your way back to the power, the source where it comes from. So that's... Yeah, you're going to still have to. Yeah, the question is there, and you still always are going to have to come on to Kol Yachol. The Mishalim are only of Chassidus are only there to sort of illuminate the process for us, divine process, but ultimately it's still, you're always going to hit a point where you have to go kol yachol, because the whole system didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to. There didn't have to be a system. It didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to have these rules. So all of the rules and explanations and logic is all also created.
That if it's not a hester,
right? He's starting with the idea, and he's packaging. The mashpia is starting with the idea. He's packaging it in a mashal. So he's bringing it down, so that you'll be able to receive it. You're starting with a mashal. Now you have to unpack. But it's all because it's sort of bouncing off to you that you're able to unpack and work your way back to the source. Okay, so he says the truth is that it's not a true concealment relative to the created beings. Also, Kim Adarab, in fact, on the contrary, the whole idea is that it's made you megala se'er b'madrega shalamata mimenu. But in fact, to the contrary, the whole point of the packaging system is only to bring down and to reveal the light to the level that is lower than itself. So how do we? Okay, fine. How do we understand this in terms of creation? We're using this as a model for the creative process. We're also going to learn from it how it relates specifically to the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people, because the only ones who are actually have equipped to make this sort of received message and unpack it are actually only the Jewish people. But right now we're still talking conceptually in creation, what it means in creation, the idea that it's bringing the light down. From the name Yud Kei Vav Kei itself, it would be impossible. Again, you could always ask, what about Kol Yachol? So he could do whatever he wants. He could do the impossible too. We're talking about he set up a rational system because he wants us to be able to use that system to get back to. So, but rationally, from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei itself, it would be impossible for there to be the creation of the worlds, because he is in the aspect of Bli Gvul. And Gvul does not come from Bli Gvul. Because you reveal infinite creativity, you're not getting finite worlds. Right? The Shem Elikim, it's through the Shem Elikim, Nimshul Mizgala the Shem Havai Ba'elamis. It's through the Shem Elikim that is drawn down and revealed the light of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei in the worlds, Lahavaysa Mulach Yesa, to bring them into existence and to give them continued life, to sustain them, their existence. That is Avasum Shem Havai Kanal. The creation is, as we said before, from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the Keich HaPoel. The limiting powers are just to target and direct it, but the Keich HaPoel, that's the creative powers, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Even though we have a clear verse in Torah that says Bereshis bara Elikim, so it sounds like Elikim did the creating. It means that they came into existence by way of the Shem Elikim. But the actual bringing into existence of something that did not exist before and is now being brought into existence, that happens from the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. That is also the idea that Havaya is Loshem Hava, which I haven't pointed out each time. Many of the points that he's making here can be found in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya. Ukanal, as mentioned previously, the Chol Pe'ulu B'Skalas HaPoel Dafka. The Hainu Shem Havaya Shulchanas Gilui. So as we said before, that every Pe'ula is through the revelation of the Poel Dafka, which is the Shem Havaya, that's the aspect of Gilui. Whatever limiting and targeting is being done by the Shem Elikim, but the actual Pe'ula is the Skalas HaPoel, which is the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the aspect of Gilui, of revelation. This is what it says, that Yud Kei Vav Kei is Melech, Yud Kei Vav Kei is king, was king, and will be king. B'chinas melech malach yimlech, which is avar heva asid, past, present, and future. Shu b'chinas ischalkus hazman, which is the division of time. Past, present, and future is the division of time. Shemitzad Shem Elikim, that comes from the Shem Elikim, and yet Mikol Makim still no. We say Havaya Melech, Umalach v'Yimlech. That even Melech, Malach, and Yimlech is also the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is the one that is Melech, Malach, and Yimlech that's operating through time. So even as reality is already broken down into time, there's a before, an after, a before, during, and an after, the beginning, a middle, and an end of as how events unfold, how reality plays out. But that's all Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's just through the Shem Elikim. So it's all the Shem Elikim is just breaking it down for consumption, but it's not. It's still all the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. So what does that mean in terms of the relationship between God and His creations and the world? The Gilui of Shem Havaya, that it's not concealed in the world. Shem Havaya nimshu meir b'chol elam b'chol nivra lavesu lachyesu. This is that Shem Havaya is drawn down and shines forth in every world and in every created being to bring him into existence, or if you want to make up a word, to existify him and to vivify him, to give him life, energy. This is that life force, that living energy that every individual created being senses that it is alive. That life force, that energy is the light from the Shem Havaya, but as it's drawn through and filtered through the Shem Elikim. Just like in the Mashpia and Mekabel that we mentioned earlier, okay, so here this is step 2. When he started, after he explained that there's no concealment by the Mashpia, and he went on to explain that there's no concealment to the Mekabel either. Now, to the Mekabel's personal experience, there's a concealment, because he doesn't have yet the tools to unpack what's in the package. But the fact is, it's all present in the package. So you got everything. So it's all there already. You got it. Not just from my perspective, it's all there. From your perspective, it's all there. You just don't know how to access it yet. You're going to have to do a process. But it's all there, even from the perspective of the Mekabel, except his perspective is not yet fully developed. But from his end, not from his perspective because he doesn't see it, but from his end, he got everything already also. So that's how he's... Then he went to step after that he can even unpack it and actually get the revelation. But the first step was that it's not a concealment because it's all there. So the same thing. So just like the Mashpia Mekabel, the light of Seichel that is received and does settle within the Mekabel, as we mentioned last time, the idea is people have a lot of experiences where their Seichel lights up, but it never gets settled down. So you could have all kinds of bright ideas, but they come and they go, or you could hear all kinds of deep teachings and they just in one ear and out the other, and at the time it seemed like wow, and then but it never landed. Okay, so it's not just the wow, it's the actual, receiving and having it land in the Mekabel. Even though what he got is after the constriction and the concealment of the essence of the light of the Mashpia. And not only that, he had it given in an external package. He had it dressed up in Mishalim and analogies. The light of the seichel of the mashpia is shining and is presently settled inside him. He doesn't yet how to access it, but it's all there. It's the actual seichel is there. He has it all. He just knows. He just read the words of the Mishnah, and he didn't yet learn the whole Gemara and learn the whole. That's going to help him extract that light. But all the light is already in the Mishnah. All the light is already in that small, or sometimes even foreign package of a mashal. It's all in there. He just has to be able to unpack. So, who heard the Shem Havaya, Shenimshay, the Shem Elokim, Umeir, Umislavish, Bechol, Nivrachu. So similarly, the light and life force that exists within every created being, that shines into his inner existence to give him life, that is the light of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei that was drawn through the name Elokim, and Parsaris and so on, Meshalem, Umeir, Mislavish, B'chol Nivrachule, and it shines forth and it dresses itself up in every created being. So now we have a parenthetical comment, which he does not, which we're missing the second half of the parentheses, but it would seem those who published it came to the conclusion that most likely, we can't know for sure, most likely it's a few lines later after the word canal, it would be the end of the parentheses. There actually is also, we say, it sounds so great, it's all God is maamar is shining inside every created being, but there is also, in this process, there is an additional element of concealment. The fact that the Nivra, the created being, doesn't sense that this life force is a godly life force. He's alive, but it doesn't feel like it's a godly life force. It feels like, in fact, the created beings that are not stuck with a consciousness and free will, it's not clear that it's a godly life force to some of them anyway. The higher ones are, the higher they are, the more aware they are. But those who have need to have free will, they certainly have this additional cover-up that it doesn't feel like it's godly light. It actually feels like it's my own life force. But there is some kind of energy. Life force, I realize, is an energy that's keeping me alive. But in truth, even this is not a true concealment. The truth is that it is godly energy. And a person is capable of actually sensing that this is godly energy. And he adds in a parenthesis, which seems to be within the parentheses, when he sets his mind to it and he focuses his consciousness on tracing the energy back to its source. Comes out that the concealment of the Shem Elokim is not a true concealment. Kiyam Adraba. So the question is if the second half of the parentheses is after this, the mini parentheses, or it's a few lines later. Comes out that the concealment of the Shem Elokim is not a true concealment. The contrary, it brings and reveals the light to the levels that are lower than it. Meaning to say in finite created beings, they are not be'erach that the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. That are not be'erach the light of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Through that is Yer Behem Gamkin Eravaya Chulikanal. But through the Shem Elokim, they can also have that the light of Yud Kei Vav Kei shines within them But even though they're not on the level to have it in a revealed way, it has to be channeled through these cover-ups. She says, okay, she says that. So now he's going to make another point. Just like it was explained earlier in the Mashal Mashpia Mekab. Shamekabel Yochel Lovi Gamkein Eimek Primis V'Atzmus Chachmas Hara. That the Mashpia, that the Mekabel is able to come, also arrive at the depth of the innermost and essential wisdom of the Rav. So what we mentioned in the parentheses is the ability to sense that it's a godly life for us, but it doesn't mean you're actually experiencing infinite, the revelation of the infinite light of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Just sensing that it's not coming from your belly button. It's coming from it's godly energy. But here he's saying that we can actually have the capacity, just like in the analogy, to get to the full revelation that we said in the Moshe that and that's the idea that after 40 years a person is koyim adaiti the rabbi is omer al das rabbi k'maykin yom v'nimshul gamkein de be'emes yachol kol echad ve'echad, so too will be understood in the nimshul also that in truth each and every individual is capable to come l'bchinas gili primis v'atzmis erin soif the shem havaya sheyor begili b'nafsh. It is possible for each and every person to come to an aspect of gili primis atzmis erin soif of shem havaya. You can get to a level where that is begili by the person. Sheyor begili b'nafshay. Doesn't mean that obviously there's still something that's left for La'asad Love when it says that Ayin B'Ayin Yiru and Ro Kol Basar, that's a different kind of seeing, but you could definitely experience that illumination, that light in his soul. V'hainu, Aidei Avodosai, this is through his Avodah B'Yigiyah, with great exertion, Yigiyas Nefesh, Ubiyigiyas Basar, Lahosid HaAlamas V'Estadim, to remove the concealments and the cover-ups, Harayibol L'Bchinas Gili Primis V'Atzim Seidin Seif, Mashal L'Mayla Mayla, L'Bchinas Chetzeni is Shanasa Makalemus. He comes to the Bechina of the Gili, of Pnimis V'Atzmus and Seif, which is L'mayla, from the aspect of Chitzenius that becomes the source of the worlds. And he says that Ubira Inyan, in order to understand how this is possible, Sorach L'Haktim Tchila Inyan HaNisyenis, U'Mashakosov Ki Menasa Avaya L'Kechem Eschem Chulei, Shemenasa Esa Odom, it says, interestingly, he only says chule, he doesn't even say the gaimer, because the Frierdiker Rebbe has a maamar, which was originally said with a different beginning. There's a maamar, Kimenasa Avaya Lekechem Eschem Lodas, and that's where it's brought in Lakota Torah, it's brought that, so he interestingly leaves out the word ladas in the quotation, which is, but that the idea of nisyanis is to enable the person to come to this level of das. Shemanasim is other min yamid ben nisayan chulei, that to test the person if he will withstand the test, and that is something that is going to start to explain. And Ritz Hashem will do that next time. But one thing that you can see from where he's going is the idea that when we say Ein Adam Eimer Al Das Rabbi Ad La'achar B'Yom Shana, so there are two different processes on how to be to unpack an idea. One way to unpack the idea is through intellectual exertion. In other words, you're working on the idea, and it's an intellectual exercise. But if for someone who doesn't have the abilities or the skills, the talents, the intellectual powers to do that, there is a workaround. What's the workaround? How are you going to unpack the idea if you don't know how to do all the work, all the stages of unpacking ideas? So the workaround is, as explained in Chassidus, based on the famous statement that's brought in earlier Jewish sources, not from Chazal, Ein Chacham Kabbalah Nesoyim. There is no wise person like somebody who's had experience. So there's two ways of unpacking a really deep idea. One way is by working your way back through the intellectual process, getting more and more abstract. The other way is actually through concrete experimentation, by actually putting it to the test. When you take the idea and you put it to the test, it enables you to have a much deeper understanding and insight of the idea. So we're learning Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab, but if you really plugged in, and he's going to explain how it's through Nisyonis, and definitely many maamar of that this workaround that's going to happen for those who are not on the level of unpacking it, which would be tzaddikim, or on the level of unpacking it simply in the spiritual realm. That for most other people that need this workaround of putting into practice. You're gonna be tested to put Havayu Elokim into practice. We'll see how that's done in Nisyonis. But if you understand the ideas of Chassidus and look at the things that we have in our everyday life of how the Rebbe set things up, you would understand that the whole idea of shlichus is this workaround. Take the idea and put it into practice. Take the idea, in other words, the most abstract, this idea that if everything is godliness, that in truth there cannot be anything that opposes godliness, and therefore every place and every situation, this should be a place in which godliness can and should be revealed, and which is the idea of a dir v'tachtonim. So the workaround, the shlichus is put that into practice. Do it. Now, do it doesn't mean don't pay attention to what the idea is, which unfortunately can happen. You can get caught up in the process of the doing that you lost sight of what's behind the doing and what's the end goal of the doing. What's behind the doing is the idea that are the deepest ideas of godliness, the deepest ideas of Achdus Hashem, of divine unity. Ideas of divine unity which the rest of the world, outside of Chabad and even within the Chassidic world, they put limits on even though they accepted the basic premise, but there's limits on how much you could try to delve into it and understand it and live with it, and certainly those who oppose the teachings of Chassidus. And yet the Rebbe says, not go out there and make that the reality. When you are actually hands-on, making it happen in real life, not just get caught up in the job and I gave you a different job instead of being a businessman, you're going to be then I give you a different job. That's the job is, or instead of being someone who's sitting and learning Chassidus all day, you should go out and be a shliach. No, that job is to, as the Rebbe describes it, as part of Hafot Samayonos Chutzah, the deepest ideas of Chassidus come out in the outside reality. It's not just teaching and learning and giving classes, which you have to be doing also, but to see how that is the deepest ideas and the deepest concepts and realities, that should be literally just your everyday way of looking at the world, your everyday way of living life in practice, in actual practice. So, as I said, he talks about it in terms of nesyanis, and which obviously still applies, but that's what he's talking about here, is this idea that he's not talking about, he's not explaining to you the process that the tzaddikim or the lofty souls go through and how to unpack it, but rather, which Chassidim are encouraged to also devote time to that as well, to not just be out there in the world, but he's going to show you how that the dark, being in the darkness and doing it in experiencing it in real life terms, will actually help you experience the highest, greatest revelation that's packaged. It's all there. It's packaged, how to unpackage it through living as a Jew.